Joining me now with their perspectives on the issue of group and identity politics and this wild contest for the party's presidential nominations. I'm joined by three of the best political analysts in the country. Errol Lewis, columnist, New York Daily News, member of the editorial board. Miguel Perez, nationally syndicated columnist. And Carol Swain, professor of political science, professor of law at Vanderbilt University, author of Debating Immigration. Professor, good to have you with us.
Thank you.
You know, I in Bill Tucker's report, talking about group and identity politics being carried out in this country simply because it works. What's your reaction?
I think it's gone too far, and that unless we can get Americans to start thinking in terms of what's in the national interest, that we're headed down a very dangerous road. Because the next logical extension is white identity politics overtly, and if you have white identity, black identity, Asian identity, all competing, I don't think that anyone comes out ahead, and that it doesn't serve the national interest at all.
Errol, your thoughts?
I think we're on the cusp of something new. When I go around and look at the Obama campaign and how it's been performing, there was one remarkable moment in South Carolina where 1,000 people in the room where he was holding his victory speech were chanting, "It's not about race, it's not about race." I was sitting there in the press gallery and watching all of my colleagues sit there and write about how a racial dynamic, sort of pervaded the entire race. So there's a disconnect. I think we're on the cusp of an interesting moment where some voters are trying to break out of the old mold in which, especially in the cities, Irish voted Irish and Italian voted Italian. I think people are taking a different look, scrambling some of the old categories.
Well, it's certainly the case that young white voters are trying to transcend race, and I see a great effort among them to do that, but I don't believe it's coming from all quarters. I think for minority groups that we're so accustomed to thinking about ourselves as separate, as group interests, that we cling to it and we embrace it more than the other groups, perhaps.
Miguel?
I sort of agree, but at the same time, there are issues and there are things that concern us minorities that perhaps don't concern the general population, and we do need the politicians to come around to our neighborhood every once in a while and address those issues. So I don't see a problem with ethnic politics. I mean, in an ideal world, we would all be, just like, hey, what's best for all of us as Americans? But that melting pot hasn't quite completely melted yet. In fact, I don't think it's a good idea to have a melting pot. I think it's very nice to have a salad bowl where everybody retains his own ethnic flavor. So, you have to deal with all those ethnic groups when politics comes around.
We're going to have to change a lot of national poetry if we go to a salad bowl. Professor Swain, you were saying?
Just that the country, by 2050, around that time, the country will become majority-minority. And if whites in large numbers embrace the politics that minority groups espouse now, it seems to me that we will not get ahead, that it will be very divisive, more divisive than it is now, and that we should be trying to transcend race, not trying to accentuate it the way some individuals are.
But now that we are beginning to gain numbers and the power, now now we have to be concerned about the white folks claiming what is right for them. In fact, it's time for us to claim what is right for us.
We need to become Americans, just plain old Americans, not hyphenated Americans.
I mean, let's keep in mind that a lot of this is the baggage, the unresolved issues that stem from residential segregation, especially in the cities. I mean, a couple of miles north from the studio here is Harlem. And you can say, well, I'm not pandering to blacks, but you know what? If you want to do something for that very large community up there, there's a predominantly black neighborhood there, and it's done through years of social forces, economic forces, lack of enforcement of fair housing, lots of different reasons for it.
One of the reasons for it is the status quo is preferred by a lot of folks who are the power brokers in that community, just as in any other. The fact that we have not had a broadly diversified racial and ethnic society. We have the world's greatest diversified society, but not always broadly distributed across our society. And that rests on the backs of a lot of people, both within the minority community as well as the white majority community. We're going to be talking with Errol Lewis and Miguel Perez and Professor Carol Swain here throughout the broadcast. They're going to be here, and we thank you for being so, to offer their perspectives as we go through this hour. And also ahead, most presidential candidates trying to avoid any discussion of one of the biggest national security issues facing the country, one of the biggest social and economic issues, illegal immigration and border security. We'll have that report and new concerns about e-voting and the integrity of this country's voting system on the eve of Super Tuesday. That's right, our democracy remains at risk from yet another quarter. Stay with us. We'll be back with much more.
We know why we're here. To build a new generation of airplanes to connect the world.
Airplanes that fly cleaner and farther on less fuel.
And make non-stop travel possible to more places.
Around the globe, the people of Boeing are working together to bring us together.
That's why we're here.
The IRS penalizes productivity. Small business owners face their toughest competition from their own government. Excessive taxation, regulation, and litigation leads to job migration. Let's change this nonsense to common sense. I want to be the president who nails the going out of business sign on the door of the IRS. Visit MikeHuckabee.com and join our team. I'm Mike Huckabee, and I approve this message, and I'll lead the fight to abolish the IRS, and we'll keep our jobs and paychecks.
Everybody knows that nothing puts a damper on the right moment like an interruption. The good news is it could wait till later. Because for guys like me with ED, there's Cialis. Cialis is the only erectile dysfunction tablet clinically proven to both go to work fast in as little as 30 minutes for some men and work up to 36 hours. No other ED tablet can do both. Work fast or give us the option of having up to 36 hours to get back to what got interrupted. And Cialis works so that I can respond to Sally only when we're ready. Tell your doctor about your medical condition and all medications and ask if you're healthy enough for sexual activity. Don't take Cialis if you take nitrates for chest pain, as this may cause an unsafe drop in blood pressure. Don't drink alcohol in excess with Cialis. Side effects may include headache, upset stomach, delayed backache, or muscle ache. To avoid long-term injury, seek immediate medical help if you experience an erection lasting more than 4 hours. If you have any sudden decrease in hearing or vision, stop taking Cialis and call your doctor right away. Why ask your doctor about Cialis? Because when the moment is right, you can be ready.
CNN tomorrow at 6 a.m. Get the most politics in the morning. Super Tuesday finally here. Join American Morning as we kick off CNN's 40 hours of nonstop coverage. Tomorrow at 6 a.m. only on CNN.
Port security, border security, illegal immigration ranking among the top issues for voters this presidential campaign year. But they're issues that most of these presidential candidates are trying to avoid. With deadly drug violence in Mexico spilling over the border into this country, our wide open borders, an issue no one can afford to avoid. Casey Wyan has our special report.
The Border Patrol says it arrested Martin Lorenzo Baños, an illegal alien, Saturday night near Yuma, Arizona. And he was carrying a sawed-off shotgun, $2,600, and small amounts of methamphetamine and marijuana. It was his 24th arrest for immigration-related offenses, according to the Border Patrol. The case underscores the revolving door that continues all along the U.S. border with Mexico. Despite billions of federal dollars, thousands of new Border Patrol agents and National Guard troops, hundreds of miles of fencing, and dozens of high-tech programs. The Bush administration says a decline in apprehensions of illegal aliens is evidence that its border strategy is working. The president is requesting $12 billion, a 19% increase for next year.
This is part and parcel of what has been real progress toward getting the kind of border security and control of the border that haven't had for 30 or 40 years. So I wanted to tell the public early that the president is continuing to stay on course with his promise to move towards border security, and we're backing it up with real money and real assets.
But that move toward border security is happening too slowly for some. California Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger wrote President Bush Friday asking that the temporary deployment of National Guard troops to the border be continued because the job is, quote, only half complete, adding we cannot afford to jeopardize the safety and security of our fellow Americans by removing personnel prematurely. Efforts by the United States and Mexico to fight drug smuggling cartels have triggered more violence.
It's nothing short of a civil war in some of these border towns in Mexico. And is our government prepared for the drug runners and the alien smugglers that are going to be pushed out as a result? or the Mexican military flexing its muscle on our southern border.
Border Patrol agents are being attacked in record numbers, and one was killed just 2 weeks ago by a fleeing smuggler just west of Yuma, not far from the Border Patrol checkpoint where Lorenzo was arrested for the 24th time Saturday night. All of the major presidential candidates promised to secure the border. President Bush has made the same promise unfulfilled for nearly 7 years. Lou.
Thank you very much. Casey Ryan from Los Angeles. Joining me now again, our contributors here, Errol Lewis, Miguel Perez, Carol Swain. Professor, why is it that the national news organizations, in your judgment, are not focusing and forcing these candidates to deal with the issue of illegal immigration, a war on drugs that's being lost in part because we are not securing that border with Mexico?
It really bothers me that the national media has so much influence, and I can only say it's because most of the mainstream media tends to be very liberal, and the conservative media, when they address the issue, they are dismissed, you know, as haters, and it's an issue that I think for the liberal media that they pretty much know what they want, and they are in favor of amnesty, and they are not going to push the candidates on the issue.
Errol, do you agree?
I think part of where this comes from, if you're talking about national media, because New York City is the headquarters for much of the national media, as you know, this is an open borders town. You know, it doesn't play out here.
Open borders mayor.
Sure, and not the first. And it doesn't play out this way in the same way as you see this armed chaos on the southwest border. Right. It has a different feel here. It's relatively benign in a lot of ways. The costs are not in your face the way it is, you know, the way they are in other parts of the country. And so I think, you know, you ask the average editor or producer here, and they say, illegal immigrant, well, sure, they're around here, but they, you know, they kind of blend in with everybody else, which is the way it looks in New York City.
The reality, what they're saying is, in many cases, they're cleaning up the skyscraper that the work is taking place in, and they find it convenient to ignore the reality of illegal immigration. What are your thoughts, Miguel?
Well, I'm not an open border guest on the program, but I do.
You're a journalistic guest.
But
a damn good one, if I might say.
Thank you. But I do agree with a plan for legalization, as you know, what you call amnesty, and I call legalization. Lou, we've been through this. Right. But you know,
I'm just thrilled you don't want those open borders.
No. Listen. I recognize, and I said this on this program many times. I recognize that we have to secure the borders. Right. I recognize that we have a drug war on the border now that is complicating things even more. I recognize that there's a threat of terrorism coming through all of our borders that we really need to worry about. I recognize all of these things are important, necessary, urgent, but we still need to recognize that there are 12 million illegal immigrants here, and we need to find a way to deal with them as well in a compassionate way. That's all I'm about.
I would like to see the candidates deal with the fact that in some parts of the country there's a war between African Americans and Latinos, with Latino gangs targeting even innocent African Americans that happen to walk in the wrong place. The Democratic candidates ought to be dealing with that because those are two major blocks of their constituencies.
No, blacks and Latinos should be dealing with that, and we should not be exacerbating the problem. We should not be. We should not be creating a war that doesn't exist except in Los Angeles between a few gangs that should be. Frankly, those Latino gang members should be the first ones that should be rounded up and deported out of the country, but so that we do not have this divisiveness between blacks and Latinos, because we should be working together as a coalition.
Can I say that one of the great problems that we're having in this country right now is we're not dealing with the facts. We're not dealing with the empirical evidence that we have a society that is right now far short of the great society that we were promised in this country 200 years ago. We have leaders, we're talking about group and identity politics earlier. This is not a Latino issue, this is not a black issue, it's not a white issue. It is a fundamental issue of American society. And we are tolerating a level of not only incivility, but a level of criminality in our major cities, whether it's Los Angeles, whether it's New York, whatever city it is, that is inexcusable. But to go back to the point, why are we permitting a war on drugs that is destroying millions of American lives, Latino, white, Asian, black in this country, and the principal source is that border with Mexico? And the reason, and I think everyone on this panel understands it, is that it's convenient to commerce to keep that border open for the purpose of illegal immigration, for the purpose of commerce. Am I wrong?
Well, if that's the case, you're right, and we should not do that. I mean, we should allow only the immigrants who want to come into this country legally from now on, and I agree with that completely. But at the same time, let's deal with the complete problem. That's what comprehensive is all about. It's dealing with the complete problem so that in the future, I'll be on your side all the time, Lou, and I'll say, Lou, from now on, let's deport every single illegal immigrant that comes into this country.
Deportation at all.
Well, I will call for deportation for future illegal immigrants. For future illegal immigrants.
Janet McGee is going to want to talk to you, too.
Okay, well, I'll talk to her.
All right. We're going to be back with our panel throughout this broadcast. Up next,